It didn't begin with missiles. It began with fear. Fear of losing power, control, and survival. By the year 2035, the world stood on the edge of history's darkest chapter, a war no one wanted, yet everyone prepared for. For years, the global order had been cracking. Trade wars, cyber attacks, fake peace talks, and shadow operations, all slowly eroding the fragile balance that had kept humanity safe since 1945. In Washington, D.C., world leaders spoke of diplomacy, but their armies trained for destruction. In Moscow, the Kremlin's lights never went out. Generals planned for a confrontation they believed was inevitable. And in Beijing, silence was strategy. Every move, every alliance, every investment, part of a long game to replace America's dominance. Meanwhile, across the deserts of the Middle East and the mountains of South Asia, nations like Pakistan, India, Iran, and Turkey found themselves standing at the crossroad of superpower rivalry. The fall of trust. By 2032, small conflicts had already started to spark global tension. China's blockade of Taiwan triggered sanctions, cyber retaliation, and naval standoffs in the Pacific. Russia's continued campaign in Eastern Europe pushed NATO to its limits. The European Union began to fracture under economic pressure, and America's internal divisions made its allies nervous. But the real danger came from alliances shifting quietly. Pakistan strengthened its military cooperation with China, signing new defense agreements that gave Beijing access to strategic air bases in Baluchistan and Gwadar's deep-sea port. In return, Pakistan received advanced drones, cyber warfare systems, and next-generation missile defense technology. India, alarmed by this move, deepened its ties with the United States and Japan, becoming a core member of the Indo-Pacific Security Initiative, a new NATO-style alliance meant to contain China's growing power. The stage was set. The world was forming into two massive blocks, just like in 1939. But this time, the weapons were beyond imagination. The propaganda war. By 2033, information became the first battlefield. Deepfake videos, AI-generated propaganda, and cyber intrusions blurred the line between truth and fiction. Governments began censoring the internet, while private hackers leaked classified data. People didn't know whom to believe anymore, and that confusion became the perfect cover for manipulation. China accused NATO of destabilizing Asia. America warned of a new axis of power forming between Beijing, Moscow, Tehran, and Islamabad. And small sparks began to appear. Border incidents, cyber attacks, and assassinations blamed on rival powers. The United Nations, once a symbol of peace, was now paralyzed. Every resolution was vetoed, every meeting filled with accusations. The world was running out of diplomacy and time. Pakistan's crossroads. In 2034, Pakistan faced one of the hardest choices in its history. Its economy was recovering with Chinese aid, and its military had modernized faster than expected. But domestic pressure was rising. Unemployment, inflation, and the fear of being dragged into a superpower war. The Pakistani leadership tried to maintain balance. They opened back-channel talks with Turkey, Iran, and even Russia, aiming to form a neutral Islamic defense bloc that could resist external manipulation. But neutrality was becoming impossible. India began large-scale military exercises near the border. American surveillance drones started flying near Gwadar and the Arabian Sea, and rumors spread that Israel had deployed submarines equipped with nuclear-capable missiles in the Indian Ocean. The message was clear. The world was preparing for war, and Pakistan was standing right in the middle of it. The trigger approaches. It wasn't a single event that caused the explosion. It was a chain reaction. In February 2035, a U.S. cyber strike disabled power grids in China's coastal provinces, meant only as a warning. But the attack was traced back to American servers, and Beijing responded instantly, shutting down undersea internet cables connecting the West to Asia. Global communication collapsed within hours. Stock markets crashed, flights were grounded, and panic spread across continents. Russia, seeing opportunity, moved troops into Eastern Europe again, claiming protection of ethnic Russians. NATO forces mobilized, and the first air skirmishes occurred over the Baltic Sea. And then the unthinkable happened. A Pakistani Navy patrol vessel in the Arabian Sea was destroyed by a missile fired from an unknown source. India denied involvement. The U.S. called it an unfortunate accident, but in Islamabad no one believed it. The attack killed 120 sailors and ignited a national firestorm. Protests erupted. Calls for retaliation filled the streets. Within days, Pakistan placed its nuclear forces on high alert for the first time in history, and the world watched, in silence, the final countdown. It was like the whole planet was holding its breath. No one wanted war, but no one wanted to back down either. Global military readiness went from DEFCON 4 to DEFCON 2. Russia activated its mobile ICBM units. China moved its navy into the South China Sea. America deployed aircraft carriers toward the Arabian Gulf. And India began full mobilization on its western border. World War III wasn't declared. It was simply inevitable. The tension reached a point of no return. Every soldier, every pilot, every general knew the first missile launched anywhere would ignite the end of everything. The year was 2035. The world stood at the edge of Armageddon. But when the first light flashes in the sky, it won't be sunrise. It'll be the beginning of the end. The night before. The date was March 12, 2035. In Islamabad, a cold wind swept across the empty streets. The government had declared an emergency. Citizens were told to stay indoors. Satellite images showed Indian divisions massing near Rajasthan and American drones patrolling the Arabian Sea. Pakistan's prime minister, under intense pressure, called an emergency meeting with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Any further aggression, he warned, will be considered an act of war. But what no one knew was that 600 miles away, a different kind of war had already begun, one without bullets or soldiers. Cyber Inferno. At exactly 2:14 a.m., hundreds of power stations in Pakistan and Iran suddenly went offline. Hospitals went dark. Airports froze. The internet collapsed. A sophisticated cyber attack had hit critical infrastructure across Asia. No one claimed responsibility, but traces pointed toward Indian servers, and the digital signature looked unmistakably Western. Within minutes, panic spread. Pakistan's air defense radar network went blind for 7 minutes, enough for 2 unidentified aircraft to enter its airspace. One was shot down near Bahawalpur. The wreckage revealed it was an Israeli-made drone, carrying advanced surveillance gear. For Islamabad, this was the breaking point. The Prime Minister ordered Operation Zarar, a limited retaliatory strike targeting Indian military positions along the border. What was meant to be a warning turned into ignition. The first shots. At dawn, the world woke up to the sound of war. Pakistan Air Force F-16s and J-10C fighters crossed the border in a precision attack on Indian radar installations near Jaisalmer. India responded instantly, scrambling. Su-30s and Mirage 2000s. The skies of South Asia lit up with tracer fire and vapor trails. News channels across the world went silent, broadcasting only one headline: South Asia at war. Within hours, both sides claimed victories. But no one knew the truth. Only the casualties were rising by the minute. China, bound by its defense pact with Pakistan, issued a stern warning to India and the United States. Any attack on Pakistan will be considered an attack on China. And just like that, a regional conflict became a global confrontation. The domino effect. Russia, already facing NATO tension in Europe, saw an opportunity to strike back at the West. Within 2 days of the Pakistan-India conflict, Russian forces launched a massive offensive into Ukraine and the Baltic states. NATO responded with airstrikes, and suddenly 2 continents were at war simultaneously. Meanwhile, in the South China Sea, Chinese naval fleets clashed with American carrier groups. Missiles rained down on disputed islands. Taiwan declared martial law. Japan activated its War Emergency Act for the first time since World War II. Across the Middle East, Iran seized the Strait of Hormuz, blocking 1/5 of the world's oil supply. Oil prices exploded. Economies collapsed. The global internet fractured under relentless cyber attacks. By the 5th day, the modern world had stopped functioning. The human cost. In Karachi, sirens wailed as residents rushed to underground shelters. In Delhi, people hoarded food, water, and medicine. Across Europe, cities prepared for potential nuclear fallout. Social media vanished. Satellites were either jammed or destroyed. Only emergency radio broadcasts remained, voices trembling, praying for peace that no longer existed. Millions were on the move, refugees escaping invisible front lines. And yet, the generals on all sides continued their war councils, convinced that victory was still possible. The miscalculation. March 18, 2035, the day the sky burned. In the early hours, a Chinese radar operator detected multiple unidentified missiles heading toward western Tibet. Assuming it was an Indian first strike, the operator relayed the alert to Beijing's Central Command. But those missiles weren't Indian. They were actually Russian test launches aimed at Europe, misinterpreted by radar interference. The Chinese response was immediate. Launch, authorization for conventional ballistic missiles toward Indian military bases in Ladakh. India's early warning system, detecting inbound missiles, interpreted it as a nuclear attack. Within minutes, nuclear alert protocols were activated. Prime Minister Sharma's emergency cabinet gave the command: prepare retaliatory strike on all Chinese and Pakistani military installations. Pakistan's nuclear command, monitoring the chaos, went to DEFCON 1. Submarines were ordered into deep patrol. Air bases went into blackout, and the world crossed the final line. The first nuclear flash. At 06:42 a.m., an Indian short-range ballistic missile struck a Pakistani armored division near Bahawalnagar. It was conventional, not nuclear, but the destruction was catastrophic. Within minutes, Pakistan launched a retaliatory strike with Ra-2 cruise missiles, hitting Indian command centers in Rajasthan and Punjab. The escalation was unstoppable now. Across the globe, sirens blared in every capital city. NATO mobilized nuclear readiness. Russia placed its ICBMs on standby, and America's president addressed the world in trembling words. We stand at the edge of total destruction. I urge all nations, step back now, or none of us will survive. But no one listened. It was too late. The world on fire. When the first mushroom cloud rose, the world realized peace had died long before the first bomb fell. Satellite images showed a massive explosion near Amritsar, a tactical nuclear detonation by Pakistan against advancing Indian armor. The shockwave flattened everything within 15 kilometers. Tens of thousands were vaporized instantly. India responded with a nuclear strike on a Chinese logistics hub in Tibet. China retaliated on Indian missile silos in the Thar Desert. Within 2 hours, Asia was burning. Fallout clouds began spreading eastward. The global wind patterns carried radiation across borders, across oceans, across continents. Moscow, Washington, and Beijing opened emergency lines, but communication was jammed by cyber interference. The automated defense systems built to ensure deterrence began interpreting false signals as real threats, and the machines did what humans feared most. They took control, the edge of oblivion. In those final moments, there were no enemies, only survivors. In bunkers deep beneath mountains, world leaders watched their cities vanish from satellite screens. The air was filled with static. The maps turned red, and yet somewhere in the chaos, a voice broke through a military channel, a Pakistani commander, speaking to his Indian counterpart through a scrambled radio frequency. Stop this madness. We've both lost everything. Let's not lose what's left of humanity. No one knows what happened next. Some say both sides agreed to halt. Others say the next wave of missiles had already launched. But the record ends there, at 07:09 a.m., March 18, 2035, the day the sun failed to rise. The morning after, March 19, 2035, the day after the first nuclear exchange. The earth was silent. The skies over South Asia were dark, not from clouds, but from ash, thick black smoke rising from the ruins of cities once filled with life. Amritsar, Jodhpur, Multan, Chengdu, and Lhasa, names that once stood for culture and history, now were glowing craters of glass and dust. Satellite imagery showed what the human eye could not bear to see: 20 million, dead in the first 24 hours. No government dared to announce it. There were no news anchors, no broadcasts, only static. The world had entered a nuclear winter. The chain reaction. The Western Alliance, realizing the scale of destruction, attempted to contain the chaos, but their systems were breaking down too. Russia, under massive NATO cyber attacks, lost control of its automated missile command network. The system mistook a solar flare for an enemy strike. Within seconds, 12 Russian ICBMs launched toward Europe. London, Paris, Warsaw, and Berlin all hit. Europe vanished in one night of fire. NATO retaliated, targeting Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Volgograd. What followed was a planet-wide inferno. The Arctic skies glowed red as far as Alaska. In the deserts of Nevada, American bombers took off for the last time, flying missions to nowhere, because the enemies they were sent to destroy were already gone. Collapse of civilization. By day 4 of the global exchange, 90 cities across 23 countries were destroyed. Electricity grids failed. Food supply chains collapsed. Nuclear fallout spread across continents like an invisible plague. In Asia, Pakistan and India were both devastated. Entire provinces were wiped off the map. Lahore, Delhi, and Karachi became uninhabitable. But from the ruins, survivors began to emerge. Soldiers, civilians, doctors, children, carrying what little they could, searching for water, shelter, and hope. In the mountains of northern Pakistan, remnants of the army established makeshift command posts. Among them, a young officer named Major Adil recorded his last transmission. To anyone who hears this is not a war anymore. This is extinction. The global blackout. By April 2035, the Earth's upper atmosphere was filled with soot and radioactive dust. The sunlight reaching the surface dropped by 60%. Temperatures fell by 15 degrees in less than 2 weeks. Crops died. Oceans turned cold. Billions were left without food or clean air. The concept of nations no longer existed. Borders vanished. Survival was the only identity left. The United Nations ceased to function. In its place, underground councils formed, hidden bunkers beneath the mountains of Switzerland. Iran and China, trying to rebuild global communication using shortwave radio. But even those transmissions carried a chilling message. Too late. The biosphere is collapsing. The Age of Dust. It was called the Age of Dust, a time when daylight looked like twilight, and nights were pitch black. The atmosphere, poisoned by radiation and smoke, rained black snow. Animals died first, then forests, then oceans. Famine spread faster than any weapon ever built. From North America to Central Asia, survivors began migrating toward the equator. Where temperatures were still bearable, small communities formed in the ruins of old cities, trading scavenged fuel and canned food for survival. Among them were former enemies, Indian and Pakistani soldiers working side by side, not out of peace but necessity. They no longer spoke of nations. They only spoke of the before time. China's underground empire, in western China, deep beneath the Kunlun Mountains, the Zhongxing Bunker Complex, a secret network, built years earlier, became the last operational government on Earth. Thousands of scientists, engineers, and soldiers survived there, sustained by geothermal power and hydroponic farms. From there, the Chinese leadership declared the creation of the new Eastern Coalition, offering refuge to survivors willing to rebuild under strict control. But entry required loyalty and biometric tracking. Freedom was no longer a choice. It was the price of survival. The South's last light. Far away in Pakistan's northern valleys, a small group of survivors led by an old general established a refuge they called Noor Base. It was hidden between the mountains, powered by solar panels, and guarded by what was left of the Air Force. They had only one mission: to keep a record of humanity's fall and hope for its return. Among them was a radio operator named Sarah Malik. Every night she broadcast a single message in multiple languages. "This is Noor Base. We are alive. If you can hear us, you are not alone." Sometimes she got replies, weak signals from faraway lands. A Japanese research ship adrift in the Pacific, a Russian submarine trapped under ice, an American outpost in Alaska. Each message carried the same words: "We're still here." Humanity's mirror. In the silence that followed the war, humans finally saw their reflection, not as nations or powers, but as survivors of their own arrogance. They had built weapons to end wars and ended the world instead. They had mastered technology but lost compassion. They had connected every corner of the planet, yet destroyed the very home that connected them. The survivors began calling the event the Great Burn, and among the ashes, they found the ruins of old monuments, places like Hiroshima, Auschwitz, and Ground Zero. It was as if history had tried to warn them all along. The New Dawn. 10 years later, in 2045, the skies finally began to clear. Radiation levels dropped. Green patches started to appear on the horizon. Birds returned. Rivers flowed again. The population of Earth had fallen from 8 billion to 400 million. Those who survived formed new tribes, not of religion or race, but of survival. They rebuilt using what they had: solar panels, salvage machines, and faith. In the ruins of Islamabad, a group of children planted the first tree in decades. They called it the Tree of Peace. And for the first time in years, the wind carried not smoke, but hope. And as the sun rose over a quiet planet, the world finally learned what no war ever could: that peace is not given by power. It's built by people. This was the story of World War III, the fall and rebirth of humanity. A story of fire, ashes, and hope. Fade to black soft piano music. If this future ever becomes real, let us be the generation that stops it before it begins.